It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler.
Hey guys, Tyler here. Today we're going to respond to a video that was done on TikTok, and so without further hesitation, let us begin.
This whole bullshit about Kamala Harris being a DEI hire would be hilarious if it wasn't so fucking racist and sexist. People in this country really pretending like we're a fucking meritocracy. Like the most qualified people are always the ones who get picked for things. But the moment a woman of color is a presidential candidate, she must be a DEI hire who slept her way to the top.
Before I respond to the main argumentation of the video, it is highly likely that that woman is actually against racism. And I 100% agree that racism is horrific. And the main reason why I consider it to be horrific is largely because there are people from different backgrounds. And because there are people from different backgrounds, that means genetically there is traits that they cannot possibly control. And to judge somebody based upon characteristics that they cannot possibly control can lead to harm. And harm itself can manifest itself both psychologically as well as physically. And so it's more likely that that woman, I actually agree, that hating somebody based upon their skin color is actually a bad thing. That being said, when it comes down to picking someone like Kamala Harris, if there's actually textual evidence to demonstrate that Joe Biden did in fact hire Kamala Harris just because she was a black woman. Pressure grows on Joe Biden to pick a black woman as his running mate. In late April, more than 200 black women who are leaders and activists within the Democratic Party signed an open letter to the Democratic nominee Joe Biden, calling on him to select a black woman as his running mate. It is a fact that the road to the White House is powered by black women, and black women are the key to a Democratic victory in 2020, they wrote. In early May, about a dozen of the women who signed that letter made their case directly to Biden and some of his senior staff in a conference call. Their pitch was about timing and history, but also about strategy. They believe a black woman would help Biden with the White House. No commitments to the specific demands were made, according to two people on the call, but the lines of communication, they say, remain open, and they had a few calls with the Biden campaign to discuss the issue. That was a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm even more convinced than ever that when we see what is happening right now in this country, there's a cry, a call for us to do something different for this country, to literally face structural racism. We feel like a black woman would actually bring that to the ticket. Additionally, everybody knows that Joe Biden was the presidential nomination for this year's election, and the vast majority of people voted for him to be the nomination, right? But for the case of Kamala Harris, she received absolutely 0 votes to become the presidential nomination for the United States. And again, the main reason why Joe Biden actually dropped out was largely out of peer pressure because he was not functioning well at the debate with Donald Trump. Additionally, probably many of these people knew that he was not well in the head, but they kept it a secret anyway, and now the public knows, and they cannot undo Pandora's box.
You guys are conveniently forgetting that for the almost 250 years this country has been alive, white men have been selected for things purely because they are white men. Historically, most of the people admitted into colleges, especially Ivy League colleges, have been white men.
What did Harvard University do to Asian students? According to the Supreme Court case that they actually won against the discrimination against them, was that they actually judged them based upon their skin colors and actually deducted points on their SAT scores because of their particular race. Additionally, when it comes down to the privileges of rich families, it's also a whole entire case of class. We know that with the creation of black universities, that meant that black people actually had an opportunity back then to get a higher education in those particular universities. And as a direct result, that will mean that many families will have legendary status in those particular universities, which means that there are some students that would have benefits over other students. It could be the same thing for the other kind of universities that are not necessarily black universities, where minority families who have legendary status can also have certain benefits over other students. This whole entire issue is a question on the issue of class and privilege of that particular class than something largely because of their racial status.
Most of the executives at companies and lawmakers in this country are white men. Do you honestly think this is because white men are just more qualified and experienced and more intelligent than women and people of color? You really think that white men have really earned all of their power and wealth? Women and people of color are finally being allowed in these spaces that white men have occupied for so long. And white men are starting to realize that being white and a man is no longer good enough. They have to actually be qualified. They have real competition now, and they are shaking in their fucking boots.
When she was making that argumentation, what she was trying to do was to appeal to historical backgrounds in the United States. What she's trying to say is that in the past, basically black people and minorities suffered directly from white supremacy, because in the past, during the early history of the United States, there were slave owners that owned black people, and that the white slave owners and other white people benefited by being hired as a white person. She's also referring to stuff like the historical segregation of minorities, like the Jim Crow laws that also occur during that time period. And she's also referring to other kind of things like redlining that again directly affect the black community in the past. There is no shadow of a doubt that the stuff that she's probably referring to was in fact a bad issue back then. And I acknowledge that because I know people from my family that were alive during that time period. It was not until 1964 with the Civil Rights Act that minorities finally got treated as equal within our country. And that's only been like, I think, at least almost 50, 60 plus years now. That being said, we need to acknowledge some sort of historical facts. The first historical fact is that when it came down to the Republican Party, the main reason why they were founded in the first place was largely because the Democrats back then were the ones that founded the KKK. Okay? When it came down to the ideas of the Jim Crow laws, they were the ones that voted in favor of the Jim Crow laws. When it came down to the whole entire notion of segregation, they also were the ones that were against like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so unfortunately, there's historical records that have demonstrated that many of the Democrats, both past and present, continue to think low on the issue of minorities and the role of minorities within this country. While for the case of the Republican Party, they have actually been on the side of minorities all this time. Let's take, for example, the case of Joe Biden. What did Joe Biden say out loud when he was running to be president?
Then you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
But getting back to the argumentation that she has made, she has criticized the ideas of Christianity on her channel before. Now, what's really interesting to me is the fact that one idea within mainstream Christianity is something that is known as original sin because everybody is born as sinners thanks to the actions of Adam and Eve. There's a saying that is known as the sins of the Father because the things that the Father has done is somehow connected back to the Son. So, how is it fair, I would say, because of historical backgrounds and what happened in the past, to discriminate white people on the basis of their skin color? I don't think you and I would actually agree that any type of discrimination would be justified just because some people have done bad things in the past. Correct? There probably are some white people in this country right now as I speak who probably had no sort of connections whatsoever on the whole entire issue about Jim Crow, about segregation, about slavery, and what happened historically speaking, right? But even if there were some white people that did in fact have connections to things like that in the past, does not mean that therefore that they're also guilty of the bad thing about what happened. So, how is it fair to say, let's excavate the minorities and make sure to hire people because of their minority? I don't think that's fair. I would think an employee will look at the qualifications of a person and say, you know what, this person is the most qualified for the job. Let's hire that person because of the job. Not something like, you see, Kamala Harris is actually a woman. Let's hire Kamala Harris because she's a woman and because she is black. So I would say that these kind of programs, like the ones for Kamala Harris, is actually causing more racial harm in comparison to the ideas of meritocracy. But what do you guys think about my response? Tell me in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see you guys next video.